Are you frustrated with trying to figure out how to magnetize your Warlord Titan or other large resin builds so that you can change your layouts or easily transport it? Well, you've come to the right place. Brothers and sisters of the Warhammer universe, welcome back to Tortuga's Grim Rosaline. My name is Jeff, and today we're going to go over Chapter 4 of our Chaos Warlord Titan build. And this one is a little bit special, as I've had a lot of people over the time that I started working in big resin builds ask me, how am I able to magnetize all of my weapons, heads, shoulder weapons, etc., and not have them loosen, foam, or get damaged? And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I have to do. And it doesn't involve extra pinning, it doesn't involve any type of faceting or screws or anything like that. It's just magnets. And step by step, I'm going to show you how you can make a fully interchangeable Titan or any other big resin build that you do down the road. But before we get into all that, I need you to do all those YouTube things that you do so well down there. Click on like, share, subscribe. And now that that's out of the way, let's do this. So here's a list of all the items that we'll be using throughout this project. So here are all the items that we're going to be using on today's build. First and foremost, it's always safety. We want to protect our lungs and our eyes. Not you. You're cool. Not going to work. We're going to need a pair of goggles and a respirator. Going next, we're going to be using a Sharpie to help mark any areas so that we're going to start our drilling with. We have our power drill with a 1/2 inch bit and a 3/4 inch bit, depending on the magnets we're going to be using. We have a Dremel that are going to help smooth out the holes after we start drilling. We have our 10-pound pull K&J magnet and our 20-pound pull K&J magnet. Descriptions will be in the video. As well as gluing in, we have our 2-part epoxy for any heavy-duty areas. And for regular 10-pound pulls, we can be using super glue. I'm going to start off with the hips. This is always where I start with my magnets when I'm doing my Titans. You can see I've used a Sharpie and I've marked off the center point, and we're going to be using a 20-pound pull K&J magnet. I have my power drill with a 3/4 inch bit, and you can see that I have tape on there. That's to mark off the exact height of the magnet, so it'll be flush against where I'm going to be drilling this hole in, and I won't be going too deep. And you can see I'm always checking. I'll put the drill aside and I'll take a magnet just to verify how far in I've gone and how much the magnet is sticking out. I always want to be better safe than sorry. Even though I have the tape on the drill bit, I always will double check. And now that we have the magnet nice and firm in the hip socket, we're going to take the bottom part of the torso where it's going to connect. And I'm just going to place the magnets on top there, making sure that they lock in and that we can pick it up and hold it with no issues, yet still be able to rotate that torso piece. Because the magnet in the hips is nice and snug tight, I'm just going to use my super glue and I'm going to glue around that whole area to make sure that it will not be able to come out. For the upper torso, I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and I am going to rough up that center disc where the magnet will be placing on there. And then I'm going to be using a 2-part epoxy, mix that together, and I'm going to be placing it over where the magnets will be resting and even up a bit onto the magnet. Also, another thing that you're going to be noticing is I will always be using my Sharpie and I will be writing the positive and negative on the magnets. It's important that you always know which side is which, especially when you're gluing and epoxying things together, because you don't want to accidentally polarize them by putting the wrong sides at each other. Trust me, I've done these on past builds and it really sucks trying to dig those out to redo the whole thing. With the hips and torso done, we're now going to move on to the heads. And again, we're going to take our Sharpie, we're going to measure on the back areas of each of the heads to find that center point, and we're going to mark those off. And you can see, rule of thumb, I always double verify whenever I'm doing my marking. So we're going to be grabbing our power drill again with a 3/4 inch drill bit, and that's because we're going to be using a 20-pound pull K&J magnet. Now, normally, if you're going to be using a Forge World head, you can use a 10-pound pull magnet on this, but because these are custom built that I did, they're a little bit heavier, and they don't flush perfectly into where they're going to connect to the torso. I'm using the thicker magnet just to make sure they lock in. And another point in here is you can see while I'm doing the drilling in, I will always back out my drill just to shake out, make sure I get all that resin dust out of there. I want to make this as clean as possible. And yes, I am doing this by hand. I've been doing fabrication through different types of materials for years and years, and I am very comfortable with doing it this way. If you are not, I always suggest using some sort of clamps and having things locked in before you do anything like this. So even though my drill bit is the same diameter as the magnets that we're going to be using, I'll always use a Dremel just to make sure I have areas smoothed out in those holes, just to make sure the magnets go in perfectly with no problem. And as you can see, I'll always go back to putting a magnet in just to make sure it's at the proper depth of where it needs to be. Now that we have these finished, I'm going to take some tape and I'm going to tape over the magnets onto the head just to make sure that everything looks like it's going to lock in nice and tight before we go ahead and glue these in. On the back of the torso plate where the head is going to connect, it's very circular shaped. You're going to want to take a Dremel and you're going to smooth out as much as you can an area where it's going to make a good connection for that magnet that we can epoxy onto there. Also, you're going to want to take your X-Acto knife and scrape on there just to make sure it's got a nice grip. That being said, we're going to mix our 2-part epoxy and we're going to then apply that onto the back of the torso piece where the head will be connecting, as well as onto the 20-pound K&J pulled magnet. We're going to let that sit, and we're also going to do the same on the back of our head area. We're going to be applying that epoxy to the magnet as well as the socket where the head is going to be. And after these epoxies dry, we can go ahead and take our heads and we can connect them to the front plate of the torso, and they should lock in perfectly now. And it's now time to move on to the shoulder and arm weapon sockets. For these, we're going to be using a power drill with a 1/2-inch drill bit. These are going to be for the 10-pound pull K&J magnets. Just like my 3/4, my 1/2-inch is taped off for the height of the 10-pound pull magnet. And we're going to start off in the center area that is marked off in the shoulder sockets, and we're going to drill down to where the tape meets. We will back off and measure just to make sure that the magnet comes in flush. Once we've verified the proper depth and that the magnet fits in nicely, we'll then just go and super glue these in. Again, you'll see before I super glue these, I always make sure the holes are nice and clean. So now we're going to move on to the area that most people have the hardest time trying to figure out how to magnetize, and that is magnetizing the arm socket to the actual weapon. So what I'm doing here is I am taking the section coupler where the actual weapon would connect to the arm, and I am marking off the center point, and in there I'm going to use the 1/2-inch drill bit just like I did with the shoulders, and I'm going to drill directly into that arm couplet. And while drilling in, I will always back off to just get any of the debris out of there and make sure it's nice and clean. And then I will size the magnet in. Once it's verified, I will go ahead and glue it in with super glue. We can now connect everything so we can see how everything looks together, and this is also going to help our layout with how we want our weapons to sit. So as you can see, I'm going to tape on the 10-pound pull K&J magnets onto the connectors where the weapon will connect into the arm area. That way I can see exactly what angle I want each weapon to sit and where I want that magnet to be placed. And because we're dealing with resin, I'm going to have to take a hairdryer to that left arm to be able to get the chainsword into the arm couplet. So now that we have our poses for our weapons marked off properly and we have it set to where the magnets need to be drilled in, we're going to take our power drill with our 1/2-inch drill bit marked for our K&J 10-pound pull magnets, and we're going to go ahead and start drilling into each of these areas on the weapons. And just like before, while drilling in, we're always going to back out through it to clean out any resin and check with the magnets to make sure that everything is fitting in place and that we're hitting the proper depth. Once we know those magnets have fit nice and snug, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the super glue and glue those in both on the magnet itself and in the hole and let them sit. And once done with Power Claw, we will go right ahead and do the same thing to the chainsword. And there you have it, a fully magnetized Chaos Warlord Titan. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you might have learned something new and something that you can use for one of your giant resin builds. And like I always say, Grim for the Grim Rosaline.